had spent countless Christmases watching from afar, feeling the quiet ache of distance pressing on my chest. This year I promised myself it would be different. I would see my children. I would hold them. I would not let another holiday pass in silence. The engine of my old pickup truck rumbled under me as I pulled onto the long, empty Texas highway, each mile stretching like the years I had lost. The early morning sun barely broke through the gray winter sky, casting long shadows over the fields and small towns I passed. Memories came unbidden. The way my youngest used to run to the mailbox to see if I had written. The way my eldest's laughter could fill a room even on the coldest winter day. Those moments, once so ordinary, now felt like treasures I had neglected for far too long. I thought about the last time I had been with them. Their faces were bright, but their eyes held a quiet hesitance, a shadow of doubt I hadn't understood. I had promised them a Christmas like no other, and yet life had other plans. This drive, this long, lonesome journey across Texas, was my chance to make it right, or so I told myself. The highway rolled on endlessly, dotted with sleepy towns and weathered barns. I stopped at a small diner for coffee, the scent of baked bread and coffee mingling in the crisp morning air. Families sat together, sharing quiet laughter and stories, and I watched them with a lump in my throat. That could have been us, I thought. That should have been us. If you love stories like this, stories from the heart that touch on family, love, and the little moments that matter, please subscribe to Grandma's Heart. Your support keeps these heartfelt stories coming. Back on the road, night began to fall. The sky was a deep, cold blue, and the stars began to prick the darkness like tiny, distant lights of hope. I called my children on the phone, my voice trembling as I said, "I'm almost there. I can't wait to see you." The silence that followed was longer than I expected. Then a small, hesitant, "Okay," came through. That single word carried the weight of all my fears and regrets. Finally, I turned onto the street where they lived. The house stood quietly under the glow of Christmas lights, ornaments sparkling in the window, the tree glowing like a beacon. I parked the truck, my hands trembling as I took a deep breath and reached for the doorknob. But as I stood there, something heavy settled over me. I realized that distance isn't measured in miles alone. It is measured in lost moments, in days missed, in words left unsaid. And now, even at the threshold of the home I had longed to reach, I felt the fragile weight of uncertainty pressing down. I knocked softly, then again, each tap echoing in the still night. And for the first time, I wondered if my children would even remember me as I remembered them, or if the absence had left a space too wide to cross in one night. The snow fell quietly around me, the cold seeping through my coat, through my bones, as I realized something bitterly true. Sometimes coming home isn't enough. Sometimes love alone cannot erase the miles, the mistakes, or the time lost. And in that quiet, frozen moment, I understood that this Christmas, the hardest journey was not the drive across Texas. It was standing here at the door, unsure if they would open it to me. The cold of the evening pressed against me as I stood on the porch, the snow crunching softly beneath my boots. I had imagined this moment for months. The warm glow of the house, the smell of pine and cinnamon, the laughter of my children rushing toward me. But reality felt heavier than I had ever imagined. The windows glowed softly, the Christmas tree sparkling inside. And yet the house seemed quiet. Too quiet. I knocked gently on the door. 1, 2, 3 soft taps. I waited, holding my breath. The kind of breath that carries hope, fear, and regret all at once. I called their names softly, my voice trembling. "It's me. I'm here. Can I come in?" The pause that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then I heard it, whispers. Tiny, hurried voices from inside the house. My heart stuttered. And then words that felt like a dagger to my chest. "Don't open the door." I froze, the doorknob heavy in my hand. My children telling each other not to open the door? My mind raced. Had I done something to scare them? Had they been told not to trust me? Or had the months of absence built a wall between us too high to climb in one night? I sank onto the cold porch step, wrapping my arms around myself. I had driven hundreds of miles, counting every mile as an act of love. And yet here I was, met with fear and hesitation. Memories of their childhood came rushing back. The scraped knees I had bandaged. The nights I had stayed awake reading stories. The little hands I had held as they fell asleep. And now the same hands were telling each other to keep me out. I tried again, softer this time, almost a whisper. "It's me. I love you. I drove all this way. I just want to see you. There was a pause longer than I could bear. I could hear the faint rustle of paper, the soft creak of floorboards, and then nothing. Just a silence so heavy it pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I realized then the painful truth. Coming home isn't always enough. Sometimes the miles you drive, the promises you make, the love you carry, it isn't enough to bridge the distance that has grown over time. And standing here alone on the porch, I felt the full weight of every missed birthday, every forgotten bedtime, every moment that had been lost to life's demands. The house glowed warmly like a picture-perfect holiday scene, and yet I felt more like a stranger than ever. I thought about the years that had passed, the holidays spent apart, the letters I had sent, the calls I had made. None of it mattered tonight. All that mattered was the fragile trust one had once held, now tested, maybe broken. I sat there as the snow began to fall, the cold seeping into my bones, and I realized something I had feared but never admitted. This Christmas my children's love was no longer mine to command. It was theirs to give, and at this moment they were keeping it locked away. I stayed on that porch for what felt like hours, listening to the tiny sounds of the home I had longed to enter. And as I watched the soft glow of the tree through the window, I understood the cruel truth of love sometimes. Even when your heart is full, the ones you love most may not be ready to let you in. And in that quiet, bitter night, I knew that the hardest part of this journey was only beginning. The snow fell quietly around me, covering the porch and the driveway in a thin, cold blanket. I stayed seated on the step, the doorknob still cold beneath my fingers, my mind wandering through years I could never get back. The house before me looked warm and cheerful, but I could feel the distance between us in every shadow, every whispered word I hadn't yet heard. I thought back to their earliest Christmases, when the tree seemed impossibly tall, and the lights sparkled like tiny stars captured from the sky. I remembered my children's laughter filling the living room, their hands sticky with frosting from the cookies we baked together. I remembered bedtime stories read under soft lamplight, the quiet warmth of their small heads resting against my chest. Those days felt so close and yet impossibly far away. And then reality pressed in. The years I had missed, the recitals, the school plays, the scraped knees I wasn't there to kiss. Everything that had slipped through my fingers. I realized with a hollow ache that love alone hadn't been enough. Life, with its work, distractions, and unavoidable distance, had quietly built a wall between us. And now, standing at the doorstep, I could feel it in every hesitant step my children took inside. I tried to understand their fear. Perhaps they had built up months of absence into something bigger than it really was. Perhaps they had learned to rely on routines without me, routines that I was suddenly disrupting. Maybe they remembered the times I had promised, only to fail, only to leave them waiting. The thought made my chest tighten painfully. I had wanted to be their safe place, and now I wondered if I had failed them in ways I hadn't even realized. I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me. The times I had tucked them in on cold winter nights, the way their eyes would sparkle when they opened a gift I had carefully chosen, the warmth of a hand held in mine during a long drive home. And yet, for every memory of closeness, there was a shadow of absence, a moment I could never reclaim. I remembered the last phone call I had made, my voice trembling as I tried to reassure them. "I'm coming, I promise." I had meant every word, but promises are fragile, and children know when they are broken. The hesitation in their response, a quiet "okay," had haunted me ever since. And now their whispered warnings to each other, telling each other not to open the door, were like a confirmation of every fear I had carried. Maybe the bond one cherished had weakened more than I dared to admit. The cold seeped into my bones, but the ache inside my chest was far worse. I wanted to knock again, to insist, to demand their attention, their love, but I knew that would only push them further away. Patience, I reminded myself. Understanding. Love, silent and waiting, was the only thing I could offer. I glanced at the faint glow of the Christmas tree through the window, its ornaments twinkling like distant stars. The house was full of warmth, full of life, yet I felt like a stranger outside. A man longing for something that might never return. I realized that this Christmas would not be the one I had dreamed of, not yet at least. And as I sat on that cold porch wrapped in regret and longing, I understood a painful truth. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes it must be earned, rebuilt, slowly, one fragile moment at a time. And tonight, all I could do was wait, hope, and pray that my children would remember the love that had never left them, even if it had seemed absent for far too long. The snow continued to fall, silent and unrelenting, like the quiet reminder that time moves forward, even when hearts ache. And I realized, with a sadness that settled deep into my bones, that some journeys are measured not in miles, but in moments of trust, and that the hardest part of this journey had only just begun. The porch was colder now, the snow settling in thin layers across the steps and the roof above me. I hugged my coat tighter, but it was no use. The cold that gnawed at my bones was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. I had driven hundreds of miles, carried hope in my heart, and yet here I sat, a stranger on my children's doorstep. The house glowed warmly inside, ornaments flickering on the tree, the smell of pine and baked treats floating faintly through the cracks of the windows. And still they had told each other not to open the door. I pressed my forehead against the cool wood of the door, trying to steady my thoughts. Why were they afraid? Was it my fault? Did my absence hurt them more than I realized? These questions tore through me, each one heavier than the last. I had wanted this Christmas to be perfect, to mend the fractures time had left behind, but perfection seemed like a cruel joke now. I thought about all the ways I could reach them. I could knock again, louder this time, insist that they come to the door. I could call their names, plead with them, beg for just a moment together. But the thought of forcing my way in filled me with dread. Would I push them further away? Would I make them retreat into the safety of their fear, convinced that I could not be trusted? I sank lower onto the step, wrapping my arms around my knees. Memories of their childhood came rushing back, a bittersweet flood. The scraped knees I had kissed better, the long drives filled with laughter and songs, the bedtime stories I read while the house slept. All of it felt like yesterday, yet I had missed so many yesterdays in the years since. And now the echo of their whispered warning, "Don't open the door," was louder than any memory of joy. I could see the faint glow of their eyes behind the window, small movements that told me they were listening, watching, judging me silently. My heart ached for them, for the love I wanted to give, and for the fear that had grown in my absence. The realization hit me like a weight. Love, no matter how deep, cannot erase absence overnight. It must be rebuilt, brick by fragile brick, and perhaps tonight was just the first stone laid in a long journey. I considered leaving, driving back across the empty highways of Texas, letting the night swallow me up, hiding my heartbreak where no one could see. But the thought of leaving, of not trying, of letting my children think I had given up, was unbearable. I had driven too far, waited too long, and loved too fiercely to turn away now. So I stayed. I sat there on the cold steps, snow brushing against my hair and coat, heart heavy, eyes fixed on the warm glow inside. I whispered their names softly, again and again, not as a demand but as a prayer. Please, just a moment. Please just let me in. Time passed, though I couldn't tell how long. The house remained still, the only sounds the faint shuffle of little feet and the soft crackle of lights. And in that stillness I realized the cruel truth of love sometimes. It waits. It waits for trust to grow again. It waits for hearts to heal. And tonight all I could do was wait, hoping that my children would remember me. Not just the parent who left, but the one who had always loved them more than anything. And as the night pressed on, silent and unrelenting, I understood that this Christmas would not be remembered for the gifts or the tree, but for a father who sat on a cold porch, heart aching, waiting for the children he loved to let him in. The snow continued to fall softly, covering the porch and the street in a quiet white layer, as if the world itself had paused for this moment of longing. I stayed seated on the cold steps, the doorknob warm from my hand earlier now icy against the winter air. Inside, the soft glow of the Christmas tree lit up the living room, ornaments twinkling in gentle rhythm, yet the house felt distant, almost like it belonged to someone else. I closed my eyes, letting my mind drift back to years gone by, to Christmases when laughter filled every corner of our home. I remembered my youngest, cheeks rosy from cold, running to the window each morning to see if snow had settled, and my eldest, so determined to help decorate the tree that tinsel ended up tangled in everything. I could almost hear the soft hum of holiday music, the clinking of mugs as we sipped cocoa together. Those memories were so vivid that for a moment, I could almost believe I was there again. But then reality pressed back in, heavier than the snow around me. Those days were gone, and I had spent too many Christmases away, letting life's demands, work, distance, circumstances, keep me from the moments that mattered most. And now, as I sat on this porch, I could feel the weight of every absence. Every missed recital, every forgotten bedtime, every unshared laugh. All of it pressed against me like a silent accusation. I wanted to reach through the window to touch them, to remind them that I was here. I whispered their names again, softly, almost like I was calling to ghosts of happier times. I'm here. I've come. I just want to be with you. I imagined them pressing their little faces to the glass, their eyes lighting up with recognition, their tiny hands waving at me. And yet, in the shadows, I knew that fear and doubt still lingered in their hearts. I thought of the small ways I had tried to keep our connection alive. The letters I sent, the late-night phone calls, the carefully wrapped gifts with notes tucked inside. They were gestures of love, but even the strongest love sometimes cannot bridge the distance time and absence have created. I wondered if they remembered those moments, not just as gifts or words, but as proof that I had never stopped thinking of them. The street was quiet, save for the faint rustle of trees in the wind. I imagined them inside, whispering to each other, weighing the risk of opening the door. And I realized that my journey wasn't just about crossing miles. It was about crossing the invisible distance that had grown between our hearts. I had come here not just for a Christmas visit, but for a chance to rebuild slowly the trust that time had stretched thin. My hands shook from the cold, and my eyes stung with unshed tears, but I refused to move. I stayed on that step, holding on to memories and hope alike, understanding that sometimes the longest journeys aren't measured in miles, but in patience, courage, and the willingness to wait for hearts to open. And as I sat there, staring through the window at the Christmas tree I had once decorated with them, I felt a quiet resolve settle in my chest. I would not leave. I would wait. I would keep loving, keep hoping, keep remembering. Because love that has waited this long, love that has endured years of absence, cannot be extinguished by a single night of fear. And so, beneath the falling snow and the glow of lights, I promised myself one thing. No matter how long it took, no matter how heavy the heartbreak, I would find my way back into their hearts, or I would wait here forever trying. The night had grown colder, and the soft glow of the Christmas tree behind the window seemed both inviting and untouchable. I stayed on the porch, the snow pressing softly against my boots, my breath forming clouds that disappeared into the frigid air. Hours of waiting had passed, or maybe just minutes, but every second felt stretched into eternity. My heart ached with longing and the quiet fear of rejection. I thought about my children again, their little voices whispering in fear. Don't open the door. How many times had I imagined them running to me, wrapping their arms around my neck, telling me they missed me? And yet, here I was, an intruder in the very home that had once been the center of my universe. I realized the cruel irony. I had traveled across Texas to see them, yet the very act of being present seemed to scare them. Then, almost imperceptibly, I noticed movement inside. A shadow shifted across the wall near the tree, the faint reflection of a little head peeking out from behind a couch. My heart stopped. Was it curiosity? Fear? A silent test to see if I would leave? I didn't dare move or speak too loudly, for fear that the delicate thread connecting us might snap entirely. I whispered their names again, soft as a prayer. It's me. I'm right here. I love you. My voice cracked under the weight of hope and heartbreak. For a moment the shadow paused, frozen, as if weighing whether to reveal itself or retreat. My chest tightened. Every instinct told me to reach out, to knock again, to demand their attention, but I resisted. Patience, I reminded myself. Understanding. Love, quiet and steadfast, was all I could offer. I remembered a time years ago when the youngest had climbed into my lap, tears running down his cheeks, and I had held him until the world seemed less frightening. And now, decades later, I was the one on the porch, feeling the cold bite at my hands and cheeks, watching as my children wrestled with their own fear of opening up. I realized the bitter truth. Sometimes those you love most need time to heal before they can receive the love you've been carrying all along. The shadows shifted again. I caught a glimpse of a small hand, trembling, peeking from behind the curtain. My breath caught in my throat. Could it be? Were they curious now? Were they thinking of the past? The small moments of warmth, the laughter, the bedtime stories? Or were they retreating back into fear, keeping the door firmly closed against the one person they had once trusted completely? I hugged my coat tighter, shivering in more than just cold. Hope and fear warred inside me, each heartbeat a drum of uncertainty. I knew this Christmas might not be about joy or celebration. It might not be about laughter or presents. It might be about something far more fragile, trust. The fragile thread that had survived years of absence, waiting for me to prove that I had not given up, that my love had not wavered. And as I sat there watching shadows flicker and listening for the faintest sound of recognition, I understood something painful. Sometimes the hardest part of coming home isn't the journey across miles. It's the journey across hearts. And tonight my heart was full of hope, fear, and an ache I could barely bear. The snow continued to fall, quiet and relentless, blanketing the world in white. And beneath it all I waited, waiting for a moment that might never come, yet knowing I could not leave. For love that has endured years of distance cannot be abandoned, even in the face of hesitation and fear. The night had grown deeper, the quiet of the neighborhood pressing against the house like a heavy blanket. The snow continued to fall, soft and persistent, muffling the world and turning the familiar street into something almost magical, yet painfully silent. I sat on the cold porch, hands buried in my coat pockets, staring at the warm glow spilling from the windows. The light promised comfort, laughter, and the joy of a family united, but tonight it felt just out of reach. And then I saw it. A small movement near the curtain of the living room. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow dancing in rhythm with the Christmas tree lights. But then slowly, deliberately, a pair of little eyes peeked through the gap in the fabric. The smallest face, peering cautiously into the night. My heart skipped a beat, threatening to burst from my chest. I held my breath, frozen, terrified that even the slightest noise would scare them away. My mind raced through memories of when they were toddlers. How I would watch them sleep, holding them close in the darkness of winter nights, whispering promises of safety and love. And now, decades later, I found myself on the outside again, waiting for them to remember that same trust. I whispered softly, almost as if speaking too loudly would break the spell. "It's me. I've come. I love you." The voice cracked under the weight of years of absence, of longing. I imagined the tiny hand inching closer to the curtain, the hesitant curiosity mingling with the fear that had made them tell each other not to open the door. The shadow paused. For a moment it was as though time itself held its breath. And then the faintest sign of recognition. A slight nod, a hesitant step back, a tiny hand pressed to the glass, as if testing whether I was still the parent they once knew. My chest tightened. Hope and fear tangled inside me, a bittersweet knot I could neither unravel nor ignore. I wanted to reach out, to call their names louder, to sweep them into my arms, but I knew that patience was the only path forward. For all the miles I had driven, all the love I had carried across Texas, none of it mattered unless I respected their pace, their need to decide for themselves that this moment was safe. I realized then that love sometimes is quiet and patient. It waits. It endures. Proves itself in silence. The house was still except for the faint rustle of movement inside, the soft glow of the Christmas tree, and the distant hum of life I had once taken for granted. I thought of all the Christmases I had missed, all the times I hadn't been there, all the promises I had failed to keep. And yet, in this fragile, tentative glimpse of their faces, I saw a thread, a single delicate thread, that could still bind us together. I pressed my hands together, feeling the cold bite into my fingers, and whispered once more, "I'm here, and I'll stay as long as you need." The small pair of eyes lingered at the curtain, watching, thinking, deciding. And in that pause I realized something profound. The heart has its own timing, and sometimes, love must wait for courage to catch up. And as the night pressed on, I sat there on the porch, the snow falling silently around me, the warm glow of the house spilling out like a promise I could almost touch. For the first time, just the smallest fraction of a moment, I felt that the distance might begin to close, that trust might begin to bloom again, and that this long, painful journey might not have been in vain. The snow had slowed to a quiet whisper now, settling softly on the porch, the roof, and the street beyond. The cold had seeped deep into my coat and my bones, yet I remained seated, unwilling to move. Inside, the faint glow of the Christmas tree reflected against the window, painting the room with warmth that I could feel but not touch. My children's eyes had appeared once more at the curtain, a brief, cautious acknowledgement of my presence. And in that fragile moment, I knew I had to try something, anything, to bridge the distance that years of absence had created. I reached into the truck and retrieved the small gift I had brought for them. Nothing grand, just a simple token of love. A pair of mittens I had knitted myself, soft and warm, the kind that could carry a parent's touch even when miles apart. I had imagined presenting them in the living room, wrapping my arms around their shoulders, sharing laughter and stories. But tonight I realized even the smallest gesture required patience, care, and respect for their fear. I gently set the package on the welcome mat, careful not to make a sound. Then I stepped back, hands raised slightly in a silent promise that I would not intrude, that I would wait for them to choose whether to accept me. I whispered, barely audible, "For you, I love you always." The words were carried away by the cold night air, yet I hoped they would find their way to the small hearts behind the curtain. Minutes passed, or perhaps only seconds, but in the stillness I noticed a subtle shift. One of my children's tiny hands reached slowly toward the package, fingers trembling, curiosity outweighing fear. My chest tightened. Hope and terror mingled in my chest as I held my breath, willing them to see not the parent who had been absent, but the one who had never stopped loving them. I remembered all the Christmases we had spent apart, letters left unopened, phone calls missed, promises broken by circumstance. And yet, in this quiet night with snow falling softly and my heart aching, I understood something profound. Even the smallest gestures of love can reach across years of absence, across miles, across fear. I sat back on the step, letting the cold bite at me, but my heart felt slightly warmer. The house remained mostly still, but I saw the tiniest movement inside. A hand retreating from the curtain, then returning, this time more deliberate, more confident. They were watching me, thinking, deciding. And for the first time since I had arrived, it felt as though the smallest crack of trust had begun to form. I whispered again, this time with a quiet smile in my voice, "Take your time. I'll be right here waiting." The snowflakes fell gently, covering the gift like a soft promise, and in the silence that followed, I realized that love doesn't always arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with something as small as a gift left on a doorstep, a voice full of longing, a heart unwilling to give up. And as the night pressed on, I stayed on that porch, the cold snow settling around me, my heart aching with hope and fear alike. For the first time, just the smallest fraction of a moment, it felt possible that my children might remember me, might see the parent who had loved them all along, and might slowly open the door to the family we once were. The snow continued to fall, quiet and soft, turning the world into a still silver landscape. I remained on the porch, hands tucked in my coat, eyes fixed on the faint glow of the Christmas tree inside. The gift I had left on the mat lay untouched for a long moment, or so it seemed, but then I saw it. A small, careful movement. The package had been nudged slightly closer to the door, a sign that curiosity was starting to overcome fear. My heart leapt and sank at the same time. Hope, yes, but tempered by years of absence, by every holiday I had missed, by every moment they had waited for me and I had not arrived. Could this small gesture really be enough to bridge the distance? Could love, patient and silent, finally be remembered? Then a small shadow emerged at the curtain once more. This time I saw more than just a peak of eyes. I saw hesitation, tremors of uncertainty, and perhaps a memory of trust long buried. One tiny hand reached out, fingers brushing the corner of the gift. They paused, withdrawing slightly, then returned with slow determination. My chest tightened so painfully it felt as if I could barely breathe. I whispered again, my voice fragile but full of hope. "It's me. I've come. I've never stopped loving you." The words floated into the night, almost swallowed by the cold, yet somehow I felt them reach the children inside. The smallest flicker of acknowledgement, one child glancing toward the door with wide, searching eyes, told me that my presence, my love, had begun to touch them. I remembered all the times I had promised to be there and failed. Birthdays I had missed, school events I had skipped, nights spent apart that they had endured without me. I realized that every moment of absence had left its mark, and that trust, once broken or stretched thin, had to be rebuilt carefully, piece by piece. Yet here in this fragile night, the first threads were returning. The shadows moved again. I saw both children now, closer to the window, their small faces illuminated by the warm glow of the tree. Fear still lingered in their eyes, but curiosity was stronger. They had begun to see me, not as the parent who had left, but as the one who had returned, who had driven across the state, who had waited patiently through the cold and the dark, just to be near them. I held my breath, afraid that a single wrong move might undo this fragile moment. I didn't knock. I didn't call. I just stayed seated, silently urging them forward with my presence, my love, my quiet hope. The night felt long, stretching into eternity, but in that silence something profound was happening. The first fragile bridge between hearts was forming. And as I watched, tears stinging my eyes, I realized that sometimes the hardest part of love isn't the absence, the miles, or the broken promises. It's the patience to wait, the courage to hope, and the willingness to let those you love find their way back to you in their own time. The snow fell softly, covering the porch and the street like a blanket, and for the first time that night, I felt a flicker of warmth, promise, possibility, that maybe, just maybe, Christmas could still be the reunion I had dreamed of for so long. The night had grown still, the snow a soft blanket over the quiet street. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat on the cold porch, hands tucked deep into my coat, breath visible in the crisp winter air. The gift I had left on the mat had shifted slightly again, and the faint glow of the Christmas tree behind the window danced across the room. I saw them. My children, both of them, had stepped closer to the window, their small faces illuminated by the soft lights. Fear lingered, yes, but there was something else now, recognition. A memory of the parent they once knew. A whisper of the love that had never left them. A spark that told me the wall of absence could be crossed, if only carefully. I whispered their names one last time, my voice breaking with emotion. "It's me. I've come. I love you." Then slowly, cautiously, I heard the soft creak of the door behind me. A tiny hand reached out, the latch clicked, and the door opened just enough for me to see their hesitant faces. And there it was, the moment I had waited months for. The fragile reunion that felt like a lifetime compressed into a single heartbeat. They didn't run into my arms right away. No, they paused, uncertain, glancing at each other, as if checking to make sure this was real. But then, slowly, tentatively, they stepped forward. The youngest wrapped tiny arms around my waist, burying their face against my coat, while the eldest reached up, fingers brushing against mine. Tears spilled freely down my cheeks as I held them close, my heart full in a way I hadn't felt in years. The warmth of their embrace melted the cold that had clung to me all night. The fear in their eyes began to soften, replaced by a cautious trust and the recognition of a love that had endured absence, miles, and months of silence. I whispered to them, voice trembling. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I love you more than anything." We stood like that for a long moment, the world outside fading into snow and shadows. No words were necessary, love and longing had spoken for us. In that fragile embrace, I felt the years fall away, the distance shrink, and the bond that had been stretched thin by absence begin to knit itself back together, stitch by delicate stitch. And yet, even in that joy, there was the quiet ache of remembrance. The holidays we had missed, the time we could never reclaim, the nights spent apart. All of it lingered, a reminder that love is sometimes measured in patience, forgiveness, and endurance as much as in laughter and celebration. But tonight, for the first time in years, the distance felt a little smaller, and hope felt tangible once more. We moved inside, the warmth of the house finally wrapping around us. The tree lights flickered softly, the ornaments sparkling like tiny beacons of memory and promise. For the first time in years, the home felt whole again. And I knew with a quiet, deep certainty that even though the journey had been long and painful, love, patient, unwavering, and enduring, had brought us back together. And as the snow continued to fall outside, covering the world in white, I understood the true gift of this Christmas. The fragile, breathtaking reminder that no matter how far you've wandered, no matter how long you've been apart, love can still find its way home. If you like this story, please subscribe and comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and what you felt after hearing my story. Your thoughts mean the world to me, and I'd love to hear your heart.